10 million trees, underwater, holding up a city. People say Venice floats. It doesn't. Venice is a rigid, stubborn mass of stone and brick, and it does not bob on the tide like a boat. The early settlers who arrived in this lagoon had no access to bedrock. There was no naturally dry land to build on, only a shallow, tidal mix of shifting silt and salt water. That geography presented a brutal engineering problem: how to construct a permanent, heavy masonry settlement on top of a bottomless swamp. The answer requires us to look past the architecture above the water and focus entirely on the invisible subterranean layer beneath the mud. The foundation begins with timber. Millions of straight trunks, specifically oak, larch, and alder, are stripped, sharpened, and driven point down into the lagoon bed. These piles are often just 1 to 3 meters long. They are not trying to reach deep bedrock. Instead, they target a specific layer of hard, compacted clay the Venetians call the caranto. The timber piles bite into this firm clay to find their footing. Driving thousands of piles tightly together physically squeezes the water out of the soft mud between them. This lateral pressure densifies the ground itself until the silt stiffens into a solid, stable base. Under the Basilica of Santa Maria della Salute, traditional records describe a foundation of more than 1 million individual piles, driven into the clay over roughly 2 years. The city's weight is actively transferred down through this inverted forest, pinned directly into the deep clay beneath the mud. But burying an entire forest underwater for 1,000 years introduces an obvious paradox. The wood should have completely rotted away. The dense lagoon mud acts as a biological seal, creating an anaerobic, oxygen-free environment around the timber. Wood decay is driven by specific fungi and bacteria, and those organisms absolutely require oxygen to survive. Without air, their biological processes stop. They simply cannot function in the dense silt. This clarifies the most common myth about the foundation. The wood has not turned to stone. It is not petrified. The piles remain permanently waterlogged, structurally intact timber, quietly carrying the weight of the city. The preservation is highly durable, though not perfectly immortal. Over many centuries, certain rare anaerobic bacteria can cause a very slow softening of the timber, but the core structural integrity holds. The water was never the enemy of the foundation. It is the airtight seal that protects the wood from its true destroyer, oxygen. Above the waterline, a secondary threat begins. If salt water wicks up into a porous brick wall, it crystallizes as it dries, expanding to literally tear the masonry apart from the inside out. The Venetian builders solved this by placing courses of Istrian stone, a highly dense, almost non-porous limestone, precisely between the timber rafts below and the brick walls above. This heavy stone acts as a waterproof boot. It creates a physical damp course that blocks the upward creep of the salt water, allowing lighter, cheaper brick to be used safely above the tide line. This city is maintained through entirely pragmatic, defensive engineering. If you enjoy seeing how the world is put together, hit subscribe and stay with us. That defensive engineering extends far beyond the walls of individual buildings. The lagoon itself is not a static natural feature. Left alone, the rivers feeding it would have choked the basin with sediment, stranding Venice in a dry marsh. This map shows the engineered boundaries of the lagoon and the scale of the solution. Across the 16th and 17th centuries, the Republic diverted major rivers, like the Brenta, away from the basin, forcing them out to the open sea to prevent silt accumulating. A long-standing myth claims Venice is simply sinking into the sea naturally. But the 10-centimeter drop the city experienced was largely human-caused. 20th century industry pumped massive volumes of groundwater from deep artesian wells, collapsing the soil beneath the lagoon. Once those deep wells were capped in the 1970s, the rapid sinking halted. The city's elevation is completely tethered to active human management of the environment around it. Today, the threat is external. Rising sea levels and high tides push salt water over the historic stone buttes, flooding the vulnerable brick above. The modern response is MOSE. 78 mobile steel barriers rest flat on the seabed. During extreme events, they are pumped with air and raised, physically sealing all 3 lagoon inlets from the Adriatic Sea. Every element of the city works in concert. Venice stands heavy on an unrotting forest, protected by salt-proof stone, inside an artificial lagoon tended by hand for 13 centuries. Venice stands as a perpetual 1,300-year deal struck with the water. Hold the city up, and the city will keep the sea out. So, looking to the long-term future, is the smarter survival strategy to keep building higher barriers against the sea, or to adapt the architecture to let the water in? Tell me your thoughts below.